On the crisis in Venezuela, we're joined by Steve Ellner. He's the Associate Managing Editor of the Latin American Perspectives Journal and an expert on Latin American history and politics. Steve, welcome to our show on Sunday.
Good to be in the program.
Yet another round of sanctions. What's new about this one?
Okay, the crux of the matter is not that these new sanctions are freezing the assets of the Venezuelan government in the United States. That was done previously. Other executive orders did that. The important feature of this new executive order is the ambiguity. It's unclear whether a private company in any country throughout the world that is dealing with a Venezuelan private company, it's unclear whether that private company in Venezuela has some dealings with the Venezuelan government. And if it does, then the foreign company will run the risk of being placed on a blacklist of the Department of Treasury and the Department of Commerce here in the United States. So that is creating a situation of great uncertainty. It's been proven that banks, for instance, banks in the United States do not have the capacity to determine whether a Venezuelan company has dealings with the Venezuelan government. And so they are reluctant to serve as intermediaries in any kind of transaction, be it commercial or financial, involving dollars. And you know, most transactions, most international commerce is based on the dollar. So that this is affecting, according to the Venezuelan government, this amounts to a blockade of Venezuela.
This sanction is based on or a Chinese company that have business dealings with Venezuela could be potentially affected.
Right, and they could have their assets frozen in the United States.
Right, and let's talk about the changing dynamics. How do you think these round of new U.S. sanctions will impact the dynamics between President Maduro and the opposition? We saw the president of Venezuela already walking away from the Barbados talks.
Right, well, this was a decision that Maduro made temporarily, and I think in order to understand that, you have to consider a number of factors. The opposition in Venezuela is very much divided. It always has been. But currently it's divided over the sanctions, it's divided over the threat of a U.S. military intervention in Venezuela, and it's divided over the negotiations. Juan Guaido, who represents the more radical faction on the right, if you want to call it in those terms, the Guaido people are supporting Trump, who basically is saying, or the Trump administration is basically saying, that the only thing we have to talk about is under what conditions will Maduro step down. In other words, be sent to Cuba, will there be judicial proceedings against him? That's the only thing on the table. And the other sectors of the opposition, for instance, just to mention one name, Timoteo Zambrano, who's a leading member of the opposition, says the negotiation should be about the Electoral Council and assuring that upcoming elections will be fair. So there's a big there within the opposition. The polls indicate that the vast majority of Venezuelans are opposed to military intervention in Venezuela. Guaido has indicated that he would support military intervention in Venezuela. With regard to the sanctions also, the polls indicate widespread rejection of the sanctions against Venezuela, even among people who are opposed to the Maduro government. So the opposition is divided, and I think that Maduro's decision to pull out of the negotiations for the time being is a response to the fact that Guaido is supporting the sanctions, and that could create somewhat of a rift, or it could intensify the existing rift within the opposition.
Steve Ellner, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.